Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. My guest today is a National Academy of Sports Medicine certified personal trainer, a Precision Nutrition Level 2 Master Health Coach, and a Functional Aging Institute certified Functional Aging Specialist, which is always good. I'm trying to reverse that at the moment. He has earned specialties in fitness, nutrition, correction, exercise, behavior change, performance enhancement, and online personal thing. Basically, what you're doing is like the 40 plus. You've got your podcast, but you're helping people that are in 40 plus. So, Allan Misner.
It's actually Misner, but
Misner.
Cool. Yeah, I answer to everything. I answer everything.
Please welcome to the show.
Thank you, Roy. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, no problem. So, obviously, when you decided to kind of do the 40 plus, something's happened. So I'd like to know kind of what was the story with you that made you kind of make this shift?
Okay, so this is a flashback to I was 39 years old and I was in terrible shape, health wise, fitness wise, emotionally, relationships, all of it. Had a great career. I was a vice president in a Fortune 500 company, so I'd made the C-suite by the time I was 39 and really felt like I had accomplished a lot there, but that was pretty much all I'd accomplished. And so I was really miserable and I wanted to do something about it. So I kept trying to work on it, but every time I did something, it backfired. I'd do something and injure myself. I'd do something, lose some weight, gain it all back. It was this whole series of things. And in trying to fix myself, I went looking for resources, something to help me, because I knew I couldn't do what I did back in my 20s. That realization came pretty quick. And so I was looking for resources and I looked at podcasts. There were no podcasts for fitness over 40, none. I started looking for books. The only books that were out there that related to people over the age of 40 was chair yoga and stretching. And I was like, no, I'm not 70, I'm 40 something. And so I said, well, there's no one there. And I was traveling for work at the time, again, at an executive level. I was traveling about 90%. And so I just said, okay, I'm home one weekend a month. There's no way I could hire a personal trainer and get anything done. I guess I need to become my own personal trainer. And so I went and got certified. And so a lot of those certifications you just read off, that was really just to fix myself because I didn't have anybody else. And I wouldn't recommend becoming a personal trainer just to be your own personal trainer. It doesn't pay all that well. If you can find a good coach, find one. There was also no one coaching online back then, so I saw that as a need because I thought I could find an online personal trainer that would help a lot. And the only online personal trainers back then were coaching bodybuilders, predominantly for show prep, which I wasn't trying to be a bodybuilder, and they were training powerlifters. And I was like, okay, that's far, far away from what I need to be doing. So I couldn't find anybody. So I started working on that, working on myself. I managed to fix myself. The odd thing is that all of the certifications and all the things I was doing, that was a small, small piece of solving the puzzle of fixing myself. Because what I've come to realize over that time is that 95% of this is mindset related, and 5% of it is what you do in the gym and everything else. So I finally got around, fixed myself. I lost 66 pounds of fat, gained 11 pounds of muscle, and I did that at the age of 47, which is supposed to be impossible, but I did it, and I felt really good about it. And my friends started asking questions, as they would. You lose 66 pounds. They're like, okay, dude, I want some of what you got. So I was like, okay, well, I'll tell you how I did it. And so I thought, okay, I'll do a podcast and I'll coach my friend, and then I'll just go with that. And that coaching him did really well. He lost 39 pounds over the course of 10 weeks. His wife lost 28. And so I said, okay, I guess I kind of know a little bit about what I'm doing here because it's working for them. It worked for me. It worked for them. I'm talking about it on the podcast. I think I'll take on a few clients here and there. So I started this thing of taking on clients part-time and doing it online so I could do it from wherever I was, traveling around. And I thought, okay, this is a good 5-year plan. Yeah, I'll do this for 5 years, kind of figure my paces of how I'll do online coaching, and then I'll retire. Well, my employer had better ideas. They laid me off 3 years early. So I said, okay. And I went to my wife. I remember telling her, I went home, and it was in September. I went home and I said, okay, this year, the rounds of layoffs do include me. They're outsourcing my whole department. And I said, I don't want to go back. I hate those people. We sit in boardrooms and we talk about head count and we talk about span of control. And I'm like, no, those are people. Those are people who are trying to build careers. And you're in here saying, no, I'm going to change this person's grade from a manager to an advisor, whatever that means. And I'm going to lay off those 3 people and those 3 people. And you're just thinking of it as a number on a spreadsheet. I'm like, no, I don't want to go back. So I just stepped in and said, okay, I've got to figure out this personal training and I've got to make it how I make my money. So that's sort of the story. And then I stepped back and wrote a book because I knew that would help my credibility. So I wrote a book. It's called The Wellness Roadmap. I released that at around the end of 2018. So pretty much since the end of 2017, I've been coaching online full time.
When I was working in Ireland, one company, maybe 8 years, I was traveling a lot as well. I was and it's hard because one, trying to have the nutrition, but two, the training time. What's the best way for people to because you can have your little gym thing. I mean, I think the Bulwarker I find is actually a good thing because you can carry that with you and you can do the exercise. But the main thing is the nutrition because it's very hard. I mean, for me, for example, I try to eat as organic as possible. But if you're eating in restaurants and stuff and the oils they cook and or they're using the microwaves, but for those that are on the road like you previously were, what advice would you give people?
Well, the key of it is research. So most people just sit there and say, where's the office where I've got to go to the meeting? And they just book a hotel that's closest to that office. And they're done with it, right? That's my hotel. There's my office. You got to be a little bit more strategic about it and look around the various hotels, call them, ask them what their gym's about. If they don't have pictures on the internet, many of them have relationships with local gyms to help you get a day pass, often for free. So just find the hotels that have access to a gym. Schedule your time and your meetings in that place so you have the time to go to that gym when it's open. Sometimes that's the middle of the day, but it is what it is. So I would do the research before I went and make sure there was a good gym at the various hotels that I stayed at. So an example was I had an Anytime Fitness membership in the United States. Well, there was an Anytime Fitness in Calgary, Canada, just a quarter of a mile from this one hotel. And I had to call them. I had to actually call the Canadian version and say, do you honor the all the gyms thing that they have with Anytime Fitness? And they said they did. So I knew my fob that I used to get in my gym in Louisiana was going to work in Calgary. And that hotel was a quarter mile from this gym, but it was a mile away from the office. I wouldn't have considered staying there except for the fact that it had access to a gym that I'd already paid for. And that extra mile meant I was walking 2 miles every day just to get back and forth to work. So it added some steps to my day as well. As far as food, that is a little harder. But it also goes back to research. Look around at local restaurants and look at almost every one of them has their menu online. So you can kind of sit down and say, okay, what's my protein? What's my vegetables? Okay, I can eat at this restaurant. And if I go to this restaurant, this is what I'll have. And so I would pick out 3 or 4 restaurants that were close to the hotel or close to the office and say, okay, that's where I'm going to get most of my food while I'm there. If the hotel has a breakfast bar included, something included with a breakfast, again, protein and vegetables. Even if it's a buffet, stay away from the processed stuff, stay away from the breads and the other things. Have yourself some protein and then some vegetables and some fruit.
I saw that you completed a Tough Mudder MUDDER with your daughter.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before, so I'm curious.
Okay.
What is that?
So that was part of me. Like I said, I told you about 95% of this stuff is personality, my mindset stuff, right? And so what I was realizing as I was trying to get into this was that I wasn't pushing myself hard enough. And at the time, I was like, well, what do I need? What do I need to make myself push myself a little harder? Because I knew I was in the right place. I'd started getting myself in shape. Well, my daughter had become a level 1 CrossFit coach. So at 20, she was basically the mini version of me, 25 years earlier. I would have been doing those things too. I would have been doing CrossFit. I would have been doing all those things if they had been around when I was her age. And so here she was doing those things. And one day she said to me, Daddy, will you come watch me do a CrossFit competition? And that hit me in the gut, because I never saw myself as a spectator in my daughter's life. I always wanted to be a participant. And so the fact that I wasn't able to just go do that CrossFit competition with her actually kind of bothered me a bit. So we had done a short mud run. Basically, it was called a Warrior Dash. Now, Warrior Dash is about a 5K, so about 3 miles. And it's got these little obstacles. Now, when you do one of these mud runs, it's not like running on a trail or even running on the road. These are usually in areas where people take the trucks and the four-wheelers, and the terrain's kind of rough. So an obstacle course mud run is a little bit harder than just a standard race. So I'd done a couple of these, but these are relatively minor and there's not a lot of pressure on you. And so what I knew about myself was that I'm high challenge. I'm A-type, as they would say in the corporate vernacular. And so I said, okay, if I put something big and scary in front of myself, I'm going to train harder. So I called my daughter up and I said, hey, how would you feel about doing a Tough Mudder? Now, a Tough Mudder is about 12 to 13 miles. And it has about 25 obstacles. And at the time, it was the only civilian-run obstacle course that someone had died doing. So, I had no business signing up for it. I was not in any kind of shape to do it. But I just knew having something big and scary in front of me. And then the other side of it was, I didn't want to mess with my daughter's run. She had not done one of these either, so I knew it was going to be challenging for her as well. I wanted her to be able to run her race. And I didn't want to hold her up, and I didn't want her to have to leave me behind. So my training was very specific to be ready to be at a physical level to be able to do that. Now, I knew I could do it because that's who I had been when I was younger. Like I said, I was into all the fitness stuff and all that when I was much younger. So I knew if I pushed myself hard enough, I could train for that. So the Tough Mudder for me was the challenge that I put in front of myself that said, okay, you can't take a day off just because you don't feel like working out. You can't go out just drinking with your buddies all weekend because you feel like doing that. You've got something more important to do. And so when I was at the hotels and I was tired and it would have been easier to go to the hotel bar and have dinner and a few beers, it was like, no, this is the restaurant I chose. This is the menu items I know I can have. I did it. I got up in the morning. I did my workout. I had to do the thing, and I kept doing the thing.
I'd say it was a nice bonding exercise as well, just to do that with your daughter.
It was. I tell people this. I'm like, so we do the race, and we're coming up towards the end. And the next to the last obstacle is this electrocution thing. They've got these electric wires hanging down. It's wet and muddy, and they've built like little mounds through there. So it's not flat running. You could trip. There's water, and there's these wires hanging that they'll knock you on your butt. And so we come up on this obstacle, and there's like 30 men, young grown men, looking at these wires with trepidation because they've just watched like 3 or 4 guys run in front of them and hit one of those wires and just fall face first in the mud, try to get up and get hit again and down in the mud. And so they're terrified. They're just standing there like looking at this like, oh my God. And so I tell my daughter's running. She said, what do you want to do? I said, run around him. She's like, what? I said, just run around him. So she ran around one way. I ran around the other. We came back. I said, grab my hand. She grabbed my hand. And then we ran straight through the thing. Now, I majored in physics when I was younger, so I know a little bit about electricity. And because the two of us were holding hands, we displaced the charge across each of us, which is why we were able to run through that wire electric as easily as we were. One of my legs went limp, but, so we went just, but we still got through it. And then we crossed the finish line holding hands. Okay. That's a moment that no one can take away. I've got two other moments like that in my daughter's life. The first one was when she was born and she wrapped her hand around my pinky. The second one was walking her down the aisle about 1.5 years ago. And here's what I know. If I had not done what I did to fix myself when I was in my 40s, I probably wouldn't have been there to walk her down the aisle in my 50s.
Beautiful. So I know that you've got a motivation map, and I've seen it on the thing. I'm going to explain that to people, because I think it's actually a brilliant way. I mean, your motivation of your story, what you've just told us, is fascinating. But you obviously, through the coaching, people have a different kind of idea of motivation.
Right. So most people think motivation is this magical force. I'm going to start on Monday, and today's Tuesday, so people are going to wait till Monday. They decide on Tuesday. They're going to wait till a whole 6 more days until it's Monday. They're going to wait till Monday. Then Monday they expect, okay, Monday morning, alarm goes off, motivation, and it's not there. And if they're lucky enough that it was there, then they go, and 3 weeks later, it disappears like dust. And they wonder, why can't I stay motivated? Why don't I have willpower? Why can't I do this? And the reality is that's not how motivation works. Motivation works when you do something. You have to do something to earn motivation. And there are two ways that we motivate ourselves. The first one is accountability. And the second one is self-efficacy. Accountability is the easiest one. Self-efficacy takes work, good bit of work and time, but it's also the strongest. So in the accountability side of this map, we have the leader coach. Okay. So in a work environment, your boss tells you he wants that report by Friday evening, Friday close of business. He's holding you accountable. If you don't show up in his office, close of business Friday with that report, that's not good. So he's holding you accountable. In the health and fitness field, it's a coach. If you hire a trainer or hire a coach and they're holding you accountable, you're much more likely to do the work. If you've written your goals out and handed it to your trainer and your trainer's giving you feedback and following up on you, that's accountability at the leader coach level. And it's powerful and it's easy. You just hire a coach, but you have to do that first. Okay, the second level is what I call the social level, and that's group and peers. A lot of people think peer pressure is a bad thing. It just depends on the peer. If you've got a lot of people around you that are into health and fitness, you join a spin class, you're in a group that's talking about weight loss, you're much more likely to stay accountable to them. And you'll see it, like when you do a class or you show up in the gym at a certain time, it's the same people. And it's not necessarily that they become your friends, but they're going to be there. They know you're going to be there. So there's this accountability. I can tell you, I used to work out at 5 o'clock in the morning every weekday. It's the same 5 people in the gym at 5 o'clock. We're the 5 o'clockers. That guy's doing arms. That girl's always on the elliptical, and so they're holding you accountable. They're your peers. They're your group. And so those are relatively easy. It's hire a coach and join groups that are going to help hold you accountable. The accountability will keep you moving forward. Now, what I try to do with my clients, because I know how important it is I've got to start moving them over to the self-efficacy, because I'm not going to be a coach for the rest of their lives. So eventually, they're probably not going to want to keep paying me. And so I want to get them over to self-efficacy so they can do this on their own. Now, self-efficacy also has the 2 layers, the leader and the social. The leader on there, though, is self-management. That's you. And the way self-management works is Self-management is about doing the little things that make the bigger things possible. So you think about it in terms of, I'll tell you a story. So I don't know what was going on in my head. Couldn't figure it out. But for one reason or another, I would get to work. I'd get ready to go work out because I'd work out at 2:00 in the afternoon. And I would go to my gym bag and I would have forgotten like a shirt or socks. One time I left one shoe out. I don't even know how that happened. But I only had one shoe in my gym bag. So what was that? That was a built-in excuse. I don't have my kit. I can't work out, right? So I'm like, I've got to fix this. So I thought, what do I need? Well, okay, I made myself a packing list and I laminated it. I put it in the bag. So every evening when I was brushing my teeth, I'd pull the bag out, I'd put the sheet down, and I'd literally go through and put those things in the order on the sheet into the bag. Put the thing in there, close it, take it to the door by my carport and leave the bag there so I would have to literally step over it to leave in the morning. So now that with that strategy and tactic of getting myself ready the night before, I wasn't forgetting things. Everything was in the bag. That excuse was eliminated. Okay, so that's the self-management. Self-management is setting your alarm in the morning and not hitting the snooze button. Self-management is not, is if you say you're going to go work out after work because it was easier, you couldn't do it before, you do what you say. That's self-management. And so when you're self-managed, that's a much more powerful thing than using just accountability. And then the final one, and this is my favorite one because this is the most powerful, is habits and values. So this is at the social level within yourself. When you start having habits like, okay, I pack my bag, I bring my bag, I do my workout, it's just doing it. I consider myself, I'm going in, I'm doing this. I start to identify as someone who does this. The easiest example is someone who decides they want to go for runs. So they start walking, they add a jog to it. After a while, they're jogging, walking, and they're like, oh, I might want to do a 5K. So they do a 5K and they enjoy it. It was fun. So they want to do another one. And now they're buying the shoes and the stuff, and they actually think of themselves as a runner. And what do runners do? Runners run. So when they set their alarm in the morning and get up, they go for their run. It's just what they do. They identify as the person who does that. They also we can still, even when we're over here in the self-efficacy, we can be still dealing with accountability because a person who's a runner can still be a part of a run group and meet their run group every day. They could still hire a coach to help them on aspects of their running to hold them accountable to improve their speed or distance or whatever they want to do. So the best plan is to really have feet in all four of these quadrants so that you're covering off on being held accountable, but you're also doing the things to make sure that you're self-managing and your identity and your habits and your values are all aligned with what you're trying to accomplish.
You were talking about the things that you'd forget in your bag. That's happened all of us. I remember one time I forgot my runners and I was like, how did I do that? And I just trained without my runners. I trained in my socks. I says, I'm not going home. I'm going to do my...
Well, that's good. I'm glad you did. I would use this as an excuse. And it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll just go back to work, And so I just knew I had to fix it. So good for you. That's good self-management. I didn't have that at the time. I had to fix that problem, and I fixed it with making sure my bag was fully packed every day.
So, like, prior to recording, you're just overcoming a cold, and I mentioned I got a groin strain and all that. So it's like I'm currently getting therapy, but some people, something happens, it's just like part of life. You don't know what curveball's going to slap you into the head. But sometimes people then, they never return to their systems that they were doing. And what's the best way of making sure that doesn't happen?
Well, the core of it is to go back to why you started doing this in the first place. So with my clients, when we first start, I really sit down with them and I say, okay, what do you want and what do you need? Okay. And I think a lot of us are kind of short-sighted in the way we look at life. And what I mean by that is we almost think we're in a bubble and that everything's always just going to be the same. But change is always going to be happening. As we get older, there's an aging curve. So things are going to happen to us, whether we want it to or not. And then sometimes, it's the illness, sometimes it's the injury, but we're all aging at the same time. So I'll tell you a story, kind of put this in preface. My grandfather loved golf, like loved it. He got to the age of 80 and he had to stop playing. And I know that messed with him. And a lot of people say, well, he's 80, right? But he lived till he was 95, which means the last 15 years of his life, he didn't get to do the thing he loved. Now, I'll take you to when he's 90. When he's 90, he's living in this assisted care community. So he's in his own apartment. But about this time, his fitness level had dropped off so much, he couldn't get from his chair to the bathroom in time. So he would have to call them to come clean him up because he couldn't even clean himself up. So from 90 to 95, he wouldn't let anyone come over and see him. He wouldn't leave his apartment, and he wouldn't let anyone come and see him, except my uncle. So I didn't get to see him for the last 5 years of his life. And he was a funny dude. I loved spending time with him because he was hilarious. But I didn't get that. And so when you start looking at what you want out of your fitness, you've got to think about what the task is. Sometimes the task is playing golf. Sometimes the task is making it to the bathroom in time. Sometimes the task is taking care of your spouse. It's playing with your grandchildren. It's doing the things that you enjoy doing. And so if you start to think of fitness as fit for task, then the question is, what training do you need to do today to be the person that you need to be later? So I say this, you might get a chuckle, but I want to be able to wipe my own butt when I'm 105. So I want to remain independent. I want to be able to take care of myself. I want to be able to crawl around and play with my grandkids. I want to be able to run around at the zoo with them. I want to be able to enjoy every minute I can with everyone who's in my life. And that means enough to me to do the little things that will keep me ready to do that. There weren't Tough Mudders when I was a kid, when I was, doing all my stuff in the 20s. There is now. I don't even know what they're going to have 20 years from now. But I'm going to be the crazy 78-year-old, 80-year-old that's out there running around with my grandkids, checking it all out, Again, I want to be a participant in their life to every extent possible and not a spectator. So if you start looking at a vision of where you want your life to be, and you can kind of see the future a little bit, if you start looking at relatives that are older than you and they're dealing with health issues and you're living the same lifestyle they did, well, you're pretty much setting yourself up to stay on that same track. And so the things that you eat, the things that you do physically, that you need to be thinking about that in terms of, is this training me to be better? Is this training me to be the person that I want to be? And I tell you, when you do that, that burger, that pizza, those crisps, they don't look nearly as good when you realize, okay, these are aging me. These are not helping me be the person I'm supposed to be.
I think we have to be conscious of the compound effect as well, because people get the pizza, get the crisps, and they think, that's grand. And it's like, if it affected you and you saw the results immediately, you would never do it. Or if there was a warning label giving you the ingredients.
Well, there is a warning label. We see it every day. But, and there's, don't get me wrong, if you have a piece of pizza, they're good. It's delicious. But you can't do that 3-5 times a week. You can't eat burgers, pizza, crisp, and all that stuff over and over and over and expect that your body's going to be built to do the right things. So in moderation, if you can do moderation, have a beer, but make it a good one. Have some pizza, but make it a good one. That kind of thing. Too often we just look at food as, okay, that's delicious. I know what it's going to taste like because Burger King or McDonald's, they do the same burger over and over and over, but it's not good for you. So just if you get yourself stuck and you need to have a burger, have a burger. No apologies. You're a grown man. You have what you want, but just realize, don't let yourself get caught up in that again or think that's the norm. If you injure yourself or you get ill, take care of yourself. I don't normally eat a whole lot of carbohydrates, but I'm having soup, noodle soup, and I'm having crackers while I'm trying to recover from this flu. And that's just what I'm doing. But when I get done with this, I'll be right back out there in the sun, walking, training, and eating much better. So have a plan. If you're going to take a detour, so, these are detours, the injury, what I'm going through, they're detours from the path that I was on. And so as soon as I get through with this illness, my plan is to go right back onto that highway and get right back on it. So just if you see a detour coming, have a plan for how you're going to get back.
I remember having a picture when I was on holiday in my 30s, and I had a gut and everything, and I kind of made a promise to myself that like every kind of decade I'm going to be in better shape. And you might think it's not possible. I mean, I'm going to be 52 in October, and I'm in way better shape now than I was when I was 30. And like sometimes people, they just tell themselves a story and they think I'm going to just go downhill. But you can start looking at kind of like the reverse aging, just how you can slow things down, watching the nutrition. Like I start doing back exercise as well that I never done. It's like I'm doing that for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years now. And it's like I don't get back problems anymore because you're doing all these stretching and stuff that I would never have done before. Whereas previously, every kind of 3 months, you'd have your back could go out and you'd be like 1 or 2 weeks that you're kind of not able to do anything.
Yeah, I'm definitely in much better shape than I was in my mid-30s. So, 20 years ago, I am much better than I was then. Am I like I was in my 20s? No, not really, because I was super fit when I was in my 20s, and it may be impossible for me to get back to that level of fitness. But I am looking at it and saying, I'm going to fight this aging curve as much as I possibly can. And this is not a vanity thing. This is just saying, again, if I'm looking at what I need to do today and what I need to do tomorrow, I've got things on my bucket list, and we went to Santorini in Greece, and there was a lot of walking, and there was the hill, and I would have gladly walked up that hill. My wife couldn't do it, so we didn't. But, if we go somewhere and I need to be able to do something, I'm going to be able to do it. If my wife were to have an issue and I needed to pick her up and get her into the car and get her to the hospital, I'm going to be able to do it. That's not a question. And I'm still going to be able to do it in my 60s and 70s and 80s because that's what's required of me. And so I am going to be that man in my family's life, and I'm going to be the example for the grandkids of what they can do. And, they're going to see sickness and illness all around them. The crisis that we're going through right now isn't over. It's not going to level out. It's just going to get worse. So the examples for our kids and grandkids are just going to get worse and worse and worse. And I'm going to be the one that's the unicorn, I guess, at that point, and say, no, it doesn't have to be that way. This is, that's not food. Stop thinking what they're feeding you in the fast food restaurants is food. If it's in a bag, box, jar, or can, you probably shouldn't be eating it. And if you do, well, then you're choosing aging over health, period.
Your podcast, we're actually podcasting kind of similar. You started a month before me in 2018. I was November, you're October.
Oh, no. I started in 2015. The podcast started in 2015, yeah.
Okay. Because, had you a different one or what? Because I had seen October 2018 for the one that's...
Well, here's the thing with Apple and the others is they only like to show 300 episodes. So they don't show your whole back catalog. They only show...
It's actually a setting, just so you know, and basically, because there could be other podcasters listening, that happened to me with my Polish one, and you can go in and change it. So I was seeing some of them were disappearing. I said, what's going on? So then I could change it to 999 or something like that, and it showed up the whole lot. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I started the podcast December 6th, 2015.
Okay.
So this is before podcasts were cool.
You like me, you probably had to tell people what a podcast was when you were...
Yeah, I did. I spent a lot of time educating people, and here, hand me your phone. Putting, doing that kind of thing. Yeah, there was a lot of education about podcasts back then. And like I said, I wanted a resource. I was looking for books. I was looking for podcasts. I was looking for a coach, and none of that existed. So I said, okay, this is sad. Now I'm very happy to say there's a lot more people in the space now. COVID had a lot of downside stuff, but it forced a lot of coaches to go online. Some of them are very, very good. Some of them are really poor. So, if you're going to look for an online coach, look for someone who's been doing it for a while and someone who understands your needs and asks the right questions, because a lot of them are not. But there are a lot more people, a lot more podcasts, a lot more conversation about health and fitness over the age of 40, and I'm glad to see it. I don't consider it competition at all. It's something that's been needed for a long, long time, and I'm glad more people are getting into it. But at the time, yeah, there was nothing, and so
you're at the top 0.5%, but you've got a high listen score as well. I think it's like 52 or something like that. And so you do solo as well as interviews on your show.
Yeah. One of the things about my interviews that's unique, and if you're going to start a podcast, I'd never recommend that you start doing this, but I read every book from every guest that comes on my show. And so the differential there is I'm asking questions about their book. Most people who will invite an author onto the show, because it's very easy to get an author on your show because they want to promote their book, or their publisher wants to promote their book. So they've got a little push to come on these shows. Most of them are going to send over what's called a one sheet, and that one sheet's going to have a series of questions and say, here's the questions that you should ask me. And so if you start listening to a lot of podcasts, you say, oh, well, I'm going to look and search on this guest, and you'll see if they're promoting a book, they'll be on 20, 30 podcasts. You just start listening to them. It's the same podcast, just a different host. This is like they're literally reading the question right off the one sheet. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of ridiculous. But I read the book, so I'm asking questions about what's going on in the book. So, and here's an example. Like I literally do read the book. But the funny thing is, I had one woman on the show, and she had one sentence in her book, and she badmouthed her mother the whole book. It's like, my mother did this, my mother did this. She had an eating disorder, and she kind of blamed her mother for her eating disorder. So she doing all this bad mouthing about her mother. And then there was one sentence in the book, and where she said, well, there was this one time I remember my mother wrestling a child away from a gorilla at the zoo. It was one sentence, and then she didn't finish the story. She just had that one little sentence thrown out there, like, flop, here it is. And I don't know if it was just internally she just wanted to say something nice about her mother, but just really didn't want to carry on. So when I got on the podcast, I was like, hey, welcome to the show. And I said, how you doing? I said, okay, I got a lot of questions for you, but the first one is, you got to tell me the story about your mother and the gorilla, And so, yeah, I just think sometimes in these books, there's just so much awesomeness that won't get talked about if we just stick to what's there. And so what I want to do is, in my podcast, is I want to drill down and find value. Even if the book isn't originally intended for people over 40, I want to find something valuable for them in there. And so I do read it. I go through and figure out what's the best thing to talk about from this book. And yeah, a lot of times it means I'm reading books that I don't have a big interest in, but I know is going to help people. So, I try to have a guest on and talk about menopause every year, at least once a year. So I've probably read about a dozen books on menopause. As a result, I know a whole lot more about menopause than I should probably know as a grown male. But that's who I work for. So I want to be as educated as I can be. So it's fun. It's fun. I read the books. It takes me about 10 minutes. About 8 to 10 hours to read a book. So it's a big investment. My solo episodes actually take me longer to plan than reading that book because I spend a lot of time thinking about them. But I can read relatively quickly, and I do that. So my listeners get a really good feel for what's in that book and whether it's valuable to them or not. So because again, the author wants to promote their book. So if they can sit there and start talking about what's in their book, that's really where the value of that book is for my listeners. So I value that very highly. It's been a huge investment, but that's how I approach it.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'd read a load of books. At the start, I was actually going away buying the books, and then I was like, "Hey, I'm promoting you. Send me the books." But some people will go, "Hey, I'll send you the PDF," and I'm like, "No, I like a physical book." And one is because, like you, I'm making the notes, and I pick out the little things that most people wouldn't. But the other thing is, you probably get approached by a lot of agents as well. Like an agent, sometimes they'll have great guests, and I always say, get the guest to fill out the form. And I know that a lot of the agents don't, they do it themselves. And I was talking to a guy recently, and I explained my reasoning behind it. I said, you're doing the exact same interview the whole time, and it's not doing you justice. I'm creating shorts and everything. You want people to hear a different story from you. And when they're doing that, everyone is asking the same questions, and they're doing this, just like you mentioned earlier. And it's like, you want people to see a different angle to you. And that's how they'll maybe start, being a client or whatever it is. But yeah, unfortunately, a lot of them don't get it. But I call it out now. I say it. I know you just know, because you just see cut and paste. They're the exact same that they have in any of the platforms, and you're not.
Yeah, I get about 250 solicitations a week to be on my show. So yeah, I do. I have some favorite agents. I have some that are out there that are really, really good. And so I will look at their stuff. The others, I really can't read all of it. But yeah, it's, the core of it here is if you're doing the same interview as they're doing on another podcast, then you have to ask yourself, is there overlap or not? And if there is overlap in the audiences, then that person is going to tune out. And so value comes from learning new things. And sometimes repeating it's not a big deal, but if you're repeating it, they just listened to this the same week or a week ago, they know they're listening to the same question. And unfortunately, a lot of the authors, they'll answer the question the same, almost like they're reading from a script. And so it doesn't make for entertaining podcasting at all.
And I think I know when someone has a kind of scripted answer, and I think they're not doing themselves justice. Eventually, they need to know.
They are, but they want to be. They want to get their book out there. They want to, they want to make sure people know the book's there. So there's value to it from that perspective, if it's a good book. And I've only had to say no to one person after I read their book. I literally wrote the agent back and I said, no, I can't talk about this book on my podcast. It is sad because I had a guy on my podcast before, and then he wrote this book, and I'm like, no. It was almost like he took ChatGTP and asked it to write this book, because it literally just went through and pulled all the guidelines for nutrition and movement and spit that out. And I was like, no, this is not going to go on my podcast. So I've only had to say no once, but after I got the book, I used to get the paper books. But in 2019, my wife and I moved down to Panama. And so we live on a Caribbean island, and getting hard copy stuff down here is not only time consuming, but expensive. And so, yeah, I do work off of PDFs now.
With kind of reverse aging then, because that's something that I'm reading a lot about. I'm just trying to understand and I suppose slow down the aging process. What things have you kind of learned in that field?
Well, the core of it is that, okay, and this will sound a little holistic, woo-woo, but the point being is our body is set up to collect information about our environment. So if you can imagine that there's this thing inside, it's just this control in you inside, and it actually can't see or hear or smell or anything the outside world. It only knows what we let in. So if we're eating crappy food, we're telling this that real food, quality food, nutrition is scarce, and it's going to be afraid. Okay. If we're not moving the way we're supposed to move, like why, the last 3 days, why is Allan staying in the cave? What's wrong? Okay. Allan's usually out and about, walking distances, lifting heavy things, but doing the things that hunters and gatherers have always done. And when I'm not doing that, that's telling my body there's something wrong. Okay. If I'm not sleeping well enough, if my stress level is super high, again, information going into our body, and our body's got to respond to that without really knowing what's going on. And then the final bit are the thoughts we have. Now, I have this guy in my head, okay, that talks to me, and he is a bastard, okay? He is. I have to shut him down all the time because he will beat me to death with words that I would never say to my best friend. I would never say to my family. But for some reason, my internal dialogue will say those words to me with no problem, okay? So there's these inputs into our body. And the more bad inputs we have, the more our body wants to shut down. It wants to get fat. It wants to hold on to that fat. It doesn't want to get better. It doesn't want to do anything dangerous. So it ages a lot faster. Now, if you start putting good things in, so good, high-quality nutrition, it starts to feel safe. Okay, there's plenty of quality nutrition. We start moving the way we're supposed to. There's plenty of opportunity to move. There's no predators. We're not afraid. Our stress level is moderate. We're okay. We're sleeping well, and we're not having those conversations with that guy in our head that way. It starts to feel safe, and it starts to do things to get better. And that's one of the cool things about the human body is that it can improve. If you do the right things, it will improve. It will get better. And so you slow the aging by basically giving your body what it needs and less of what it doesn't need. Now, what I just described, that inner voice, it's all managed by our endocrine system. So it's a very non-complex way to say, if you're keeping your cortisol levels low, you're keeping your testosterone and, other sex hormones in check, your thyroid is managed, you're sleeping, so you're getting good cycles overnight that allow your body to do the things it needs to do, then you're keeping your hormones in check and you get healthier. And so that's a simple way I like to say is like, if you just give your body what it needs, it will take care of you. It will get healthier and it will do what it needs to do. So it's not a hard protocol other than it's everything we typically don't do. We eat crap. We don't move enough. We are always epically stressed, social media and the news and work and everything else. And a lot of us just don't sleep enough. We stay up too late. We get up too early. And we've got those inner voices. When we screw up, we're using those words we would never say to a friend or someone we care about. So if you can kind of focus on those 5 inputs, you'll do a lot to improve your health and your longevity.
No, excellent. Yeah, just finally, you've got, you do the online. So when you have people online, because sometimes people think, oh, I need to be with somebody in person. But the reality is, we're talking here. I'm in Poland. Yeah. It's, we can feed the information.
Exactly. I've got clients all over the world. And so, there's 2 cool aspects of this. One is, it can be synchronous. We're here at the same time. We can figure that out. Okay. It's easy enough. Or it could be asynchronous, where I give you some instruction and you go do it on your own time. So, normally, if you went to go see a personal trainer, you would have to go during his or her opportunity. So you look at their calendar like, oh, okay, well, I've got a 5 o'clock in the morning or an 8 o'clock in the evening. Which one do you want? And you have to be there at that time. And if they get sick, like I am now, they have to cancel that session. If you get sick or injured, you cancel that session. I can pretty much do everything that your in-person person does. Okay, so you're going to go do the work. They've programmed what you're going to do. And then you do the lift. And they tell you you did okay. Maybe they count the reps. Maybe they help you load plates. Only thing I can't do is help you load and unload the plates. and I can't count reps for you. But literally, I can give you the workout. If you are uncomfortable with your form, you can film yourself doing it and send that to me, and I can give you those same coaching cues, and we can get you just as well. The fundamental difference, though, is when you paid for that hour with that coach, when you leave, his next client is standing right there. So he just stopped working for you at that moment, and he's not going to think about you again until your next session. But with an online coach, I'm much more focused in outcome, not the hour. I want you to have a particular outcome that we talk about at the very beginning, and that's what I'm helping you work towards. So we're in touch a lot more during the week. You're texting, emailing, I have an app, so there's a lot more go-between. You have a lot more support, a lot more accountability, and a lot more guidance than you would get from meeting someone in person typically. And it tends to be cheaper than hiring someone in person because they're selling you their hours, and they only have so many of those. So if they're a good trainer, you're going to have really bad hours, or you're going to pay a lot for his hours.
Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, Allan. You might let people know where they can find you.
Sure. You can go to 40plusfitness.com. That's 40plusfitness.com. And there's links there to the podcast, to the book. You can find the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Been out there for a while. It's the same logo. It's orange and blue. But you look up 40 Plus Fitness on any podcast app, and you're going to find me there. Encourage you to come listen, learn more about me. This is who I am. You hear me on this podcast, but like if I'm coaching you, it's the same me, same thing. If you listen to podcasts, if you listen to audiobook, because my book does have an audiobook, it's me. I don't hire out to other coaches. So it's just, that's how I look at it, is I want to help as many people as I can, but I don't want to run a multi-global business. So it's just me helping people get healthy and fit. So come check me out.
Sure. I'll post the links, both the audio and video, as well as the podcast. So thanks very much, Allan.
Thank you, Roy.
So that's all for the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. Be sure to comment on everything we discussed. What's your thoughts on everything? Once it's not abusive, it stays up. Until next week, take care. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. As mentioned at the start, you'll find my 6 podcasts on bio.link/podcaster. And also, if you'd like to start a podcast or do a podcasting tour, you'll find the information on that or on the QR code that's there. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and share with your friends because it really helps. Until next week, take care.